Hey there guys, it's been a while since I've uploaded a video, and there are some reasons for that. And the reasons are going to be something we're discussing in this video. This video is going to be very different from my usual videos. It's going to be me just talking basically with some background footage. I really try not to be a doomer about the game in my videos, but this video is going to be different. It's going to be a bit more controversial, and it's also just going to be more doomer-pilled than my previous videos. I do just quickly want to give some disclaimers. I haven't played a huge amount of Dark and Darker for the past, I think it's 3 wipes at this point, so some of my takes might be a little bit out of touch. Hopefully you can forgive those. I feel like the core parts of the video still stay the same, even if I haven't played the current wipes for a good while. And this video is basically going to be split into 2 parts. The first part is just going to be about my thoughts on Dark and Darker, and the second part is just going to be a little bit about my channel. That's only going to be a tiny little bit, but I'll leave chapters, so you'll be able to skip through if you want to. And I do want to preface this with, I do really enjoy this game, and I want to see this game succeed and do well. But ultimately, the way development has gone recently, not even just recently, just as a whole in this game, I feel like what's likely to happen is someone maybe a little bit more consistent with their development comes around, steals, you know, the concept, the core of this game, maybe steals is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, takes the concept and actually just develops it well and consistently. Not at all like Iron Mace has done. No shade to Iron Mace, by the way, like, or the individual people there anyway. At the end of the day, I'm sure a lot of them there are doing their best, and it's just something, who knows what the issue is, but something is holding back the development of this game, and it's just a shame to see as someone who really enjoyed this game. One of the first things I said to my friends when I was introducing them to the game was something along the lines of, I swear you give this game a year or 2 to cook, and it will be amazing. Well, they've had the year or 2, so what's changed? Let's have a look. So, what is new since the release? Ice Caverns. It's a good map. I like it. I think it's nice that they went for a different theme. Wyvern is a very interesting boss. I think it shows that they have gotten a lot better at making maps since they originally started with crypts. It's just a lot more interesting. It's a very PvE-oriented map somehow. I'm not exactly sure why that is, to be honest, but most of the times I go in, I see people primarily dying to PvE. The player density feels a little bit low. Not necessarily a bad thing, just an unusual design choice, I feel. Not too much to say about this map. It's a pretty cool map, although it is supposed to be a 3-layer dungeon, and still we only have 2 after all this time. There is also, of course, the water map that they've teased. I was still playing the game and making videos actively when they were teasing this, and it's still nowhere to be seen. Where is it? Okay, anyway, next point. They redid Ruins. Okay, I don't know how much development time this really took. I hope it didn't take too much, because at the end of the day, it's still primarily the same map. They have added a few new enemy types. They have, of course, added the Banshee, the Spectral Knight. Those are nice. I really like having the addition of more bosses. I think this is what the game needs. More things to bring people together, or more objectives on the map. But anyway, about Ruins, yep, I think they are getting better at making maps. I think it is shown quite evidently, but it just isn't really enough to support the game. It goes on, they have added the new bosses, of course. There's the Cyclops on Goblin Caves with the interconnected room between Troll and Cyclops. That's pretty cool. I like that. Again, gives you an objective, gives you a goal if you want to go for that. But this is something I really don't feel like should have taken too much dev time, and it most likely didn't, to be fair, but why are there not more things like this? Procedurally generated maps, these are pretty cool. I'm glad it's finally in the game. It took, in my opinion, too long, but there were a few teething issues, but I think overall it's good. It does still need more work. That I have seen people get completely trapped in their spawn room and they just die, but, you know, these things are probably going to happen, unfortunately, whilst they fix it out. But yeah, very positive change, just a bit slow. And I think that's a theme that's going to be quite consistent in this video. Fog of War. I liked this idea. It seems like it's been backtracked, I think, at the moment. I don't think it's actually in the game at all. I'm not sure why exactly. I do understand it could make extraction a little bit of a pain sometimes. And it probably made the quests that you have to go to specific areas a little bit annoying, but I feel like if it was just a bit more generous on the area that was revealed. Either way, this is a small change. I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme of things. But again, it's dev time dedicated to something. Probably not a huge amount. I don't know how much it would take to take a Fog of War. I'm not a developer, but I can't imagine it would take them too long to create this. Druid. We've had the new classes. Druid completely breaks the game for some reasons. I don't know why they are allowed to do this. I main Druid, like, I was maining Druid the last time I played the game. I really enjoy Druid, however, it is straight up broken. Rat form, I think, should just straight up be removed. I don't think it should exist. I think it's stupid. It's like a little jokey thing, which, you know, that's okay, but you shouldn't be able to do the rat jump through doors and stuff, because it completely breaks the logic of the game. And also the dash, being able to panther dash into chicken and just completely break the move speed cap of the game. I don't understand why this is allowed. It shouldn't be, but okay, yeah. Sorcerer was also added. It's pretty cool. It's got a few new, unique mechanics. It's a very interesting class. Again, it breaks the game a little bit, but not too bad. Definitely not as egregious as Druid. Warlock has been expanded. Again, that's actually very cool. I'm glad they've done it. Warlock is quite an in-depth class now. In fact, I'd say it's probably one of the more refined classes in the game now, compared to at launch, where you didn't have even things like Torch Mastery. You just had a few dots, and that was pretty much all you had. Blow of Corruption. And a few others for the other classes, like Druid got the addition of the like healer only kind of build. You can't shapeshift. That's quite interesting. Definitely needs to be expanded more. A lot of the other classes haven't really received too much. They might have received a new perk, just like Faithfulness for the Cleric, for example. I think there just needs to be more variety. I would say build diversity overall is just pretty low. Which something, again, this is a bit subjective, but this is something I personally enjoy a lot. I like making builds and thinking of builds and just trying to cook up different ways to play the game, or maybe alternate variations. The Expressman. Expressman's a good change. I'm glad that it's been added. For some reason they just, again, decided to remove it for a while, but luckily it is back in the game now. Cool. I don't know how much dev time it would have taken to add the Expressman. You'd hope not much. But it's a nice addition. It makes playing the game feel a lot better. It makes the 3-layer dungeon system feel a lot better. Good. Good for the game. PvE mode. I don't understand the thought behind the PvE mode. It's not what I was expecting at all. Again, this is going to be a bit of a subjective one, because if you're someone who just wants to play the game, chill, and do quests, I guess you'll probably really enjoy PvE mode. Personally, it's not something I'm particularly interested in, and I also imagined it as more of a you versus the dungeon experience, rather than you have a bunch of other teams in there as well, but you just can't fight each other. It's not what I was expecting, and I wasn't really that excited for PvE mode anyway, but I think it's just a bit disappointing. Arena. Okay, again, this is another subjective thing. I don't know how much dev time they dedicated to Arena. I would hope it's not too much, because I feel like they should be focusing on the core main part of the game, rather than these kind of sub-modes or different game modes. It's too early to be working on these things. Arena should have came way later, in my opinion. But again, if you really like it, I guess you probably really enjoy it. For me, personally, if I wanted to play these kind of PvP competitive games, I'd probably play a different game. But either way, that's a bit of a subjective point, so either way, that's up to you guys, really. Socketing system. It's kind of cool, I guess. It's maybe a bit overpowered. I'm glad that we have some way of kind of changing gear. Maybe it would be cooler if it was linked to professions, and you could have like enchanters and blacksmiths and these kind of things, but maybe that's a bit too much work, but that's something I would like to see. I think that's actually kind of an interesting way of doing it. We got those special mobs that very rarely spawn. They're like 1 in 1,000 chance to spawn or something that drop the minor artifacts. Again, you know, that's kind of cool. They're very rare though. I feel like they're probably a bit too rare. Maybe you could nerf the minor artifacts if they're too strong and make them just a bit more common. I haven't seen a single one. Granted, I haven't played the game a huge amount since they have been added, so maybe that's the reason, but I have played a decent chunk, and I would have liked to have seen at least one by now, but no, I have not. Multiclassing. Multiclassing was a bit of a band-aid, really, just to try and artificially inflate how much content there is in the game. I think multiclassing is very broken, and it shouldn't have been in the game. It was interesting to try it. I'm glad that they do try these things. That is one thing I will say about animes. They do experiment with things, which I do appreciate. However, I think multiclassing should not return. Maybe it could return in some very limited form, like maybe you can use one skill from a different class and one perk from a different class, something like that. But either way, it kind of breaks the core parts of the game. I don't think it should come back. They have added various new mobs, specifically in Ruins and also in Hell recently. They added a few new more. These are cool, good. I'm glad there's more variety. I feel like there needs to be quite a few more. But I think the key thing is there needs to be more maps and more variations of maps and more themes, stuff like that. Like, how cool would it be going into like a vampire castle as one of the maps? And obviously we've got the water map upcoming. This is just one of the key things I think about. This game is heavily based on Dungeons & Dragons, right? It even has the same acronym and things. I think they just need to work more on the actual dungeon crawling and the kind of role-playing elements of this game, rather than trying to make it a kind of PvP hardcore fighter game. And, you know, I'm sure some people would like that, and again, it's another part of a bit of a subjective point, but I feel like the main thing that makes this game different is the dungeon crawling aspect. There are plenty of games where if you want to go and play a competitive PvP game, there are tons of games where you can do that. But the actual dungeon crawling games, how many dungeon crawling games are there like that? If it wasn't for the Oblivion remaster recently, the last one would have been like Skyrim, or at least at a pretty major scale. There probably were some smaller indie games that I'm unaware of and things like that, but yeah. The questing system. I really liked the questing system when it first came out. Nowadays, I'm very disappointed by it. I think it's very grindy, it's tedious, I don't like being told how to play the game. It gets to the point where you inevitably are bottlenecked into playing a certain map or a certain way you don't really necessarily want to. This is again another bit of a subjective point, but for me, I personally really don't like the questing system. It's tedious. Some people probably love it though, so hey. Races, you know, cool little customization. Whether they should be linked to stats, I'm not sure. This is another way they tried to monetize the game originally, but I think it's cool that there's customization. Again, it's probably not something that takes a huge amount of dev time, so that's fine. That's cool. The marketplace. Now, the marketplace is so much better than the previous trading system. The previous trading system, if you didn't play the game when it was out, was complete trash. Took forever to do anything. It just sucked. It was awful. You couldn't play the game whilst trading. There is another discussion whether to actually having trading in your game makes it better, or whether it would be better as an SSF style environment. I think personally, I enjoy games with economies, so I think having trading is actually pretty important. It would be cool though, however, if there were some way of having SSF, solo self-found, or just self-found based modes in the game themselves. But again, this isn't something that devs should prioritize. I feel like they should stick to the core parts of the game, and maybe later on, again, this is going to be like another side mode like Arena, where it could be something cool, but it's just a side thing that should not be the focus. We got the gear scores system, which for some reason they have recently backtracked on and made it back to rarity, which is exactly how it was when it started. The thought process behind it, I cannot understand. Maybe I'm being a bit dull here, but I cannot understand why they would backtrack it from the actual gear system, which they'd, you know, developed and thought about, to just rarity. I can't understand what the benefit is of just having rarity. If you have one purple, you're now put in the purple rarity game instead of just being at the, you know, maybe in the mid-tier of the low gear score. Nonsensical. Complete just backtracking for no reason. They've expanded crafting a decent bit. This is pretty cool. I like this. Again, this is something that I think could be linked to professions somehow rather than quests. I think that would be a cool little thing, addition to the game. Maybe it would be a bit more role-playing, but it'd give you more reason to interact with other players as well. I think that's cool. From an RPG game style like this, I would kind of expect it more from something like a profession system. I think that would actually be really cool. And then, this is something which is quite interesting. There was that patch where gear completely just basically didn't matter at all, and white gear was like as good as unique gear almost. You just didn't have the small random bonuses. Why? I understand that this is, again, the devs splitting between kind of having a dungeon crawling RPG game and trying to make a competitive, perfectly balanced PvP game. I don't understand why they split so hard on these things. It's just frustrating. It was fun for like a patch, but how much dev time was spent on this to be completely reverted in like 2 hotfixes or something like that? It's just a complete waste of dev time. So those are the new additions since the release of the game, and while it does sound like a lot, I think a lot of these things are really just small improvements or small additions that don't really improve the core of the gameplay at all. And especially with the amount of things they've backtracked on, it's just so much wasted dev time for no reason. Now, a lot of these things you could say that they're, you know, you don't need a huge amount of devs working on these things, and you can still have people doing these small things to keep the game going whilst people work on the new content, which would be a fair point. But where is the new content? Every wipe, I'm really excited to try and get back into the game and play it a bunch more, and I look at the new content and it's like, wow, 2 new pairs of gloves, 1 new spell for Sorcerer. They buffed Barbarian again. And then there is the religion system, which I don't think I need to tell you has been very disappointing and hasn't really made any real effect on the game, except from some small stat bonuses and a bit of a gold dump, which gold dump might be good for the economy, but not with the way it's implemented and just thrown into the wipes at random times at this point. It's just weird. So, those are most of the additions to Dark and Darker since it finally released into early access. And while that was quite a negative outlook on it, I do still really enjoy this game, and I do hope it is done well and Iron Mace pick it up. I want to see Dark and Darker succeed. I don't want to see another company take the core idea of the game and then be successful themselves. But ultimately, if Dark and Darker continues on this trajectory, I feel like that's what's likely to happen. Overall, I just feel like Dark and Darker misses a lot of the dungeon crawling and RPG elements of what makes this game unique. There are so many competitive PvP games out there. Dark and Darker, whilst it absolutely can be one, and I think that would be a noble goal in the future, I think it should make the more core parts fun and more refined for now, and just expand upon them. And then in the future, when there is the base for the game, the content is there, then they can start slightly twisting the knobs to see what value of axe specialization is the most balanced. So, what would I like to see? And this is of course just a subjective list of a few ideas that I've thought about. It's not just me, there are plenty of other people who have suggested these kind of things in the community. The biggest number one for me would be added build variety. This could be in the forms of skill talent trees, this could be in subclasses. Personally, I would love skill trees with some good depth. I love slightly trying out different builds and trying to not necessarily min-max, but just play off of a theme, even. It doesn't even necessarily need to be good, it just needs to be kind of viable. These could fundamentally change how the game actually plays out. They could be massive changes to classes, they could just be bonuses, it could be plenty of different things. Just please give us something. Please just give us more build customization than 2 skills and 4 perks. Because the thing is, a lot of the perks and skills aren't even viable anyway because they are so weak. Or you can see like herbs on a druid. I think one interesting idea could be that each class has 2 minor perks as well, and these could be the things that aren't really combat buffs. They can be combat buffs. For example, I think the cleric doing extra damage to undead, I think that would be an interesting minor perk. It does affect combat slightly. You know, aside from that, maybe the traps visibility from the rogue, the herb specialization thing, the thing that lets you see herbs on the druid, these kind of things would just be nice little roleplay minor perks which would just give you small bonuses. Because ultimately you just can't really justify spending a major perk slot which can give you direct combat strength on these little bonuses, like the reduced damage taken from undead and demons and the warlock. Whilst that can sometimes happen, help in combat, it's gonna be pretty rare. I would like to see them stop the precise balance tuning, which is something that should be done much later on. Like, the difference between Barbarian being OP and Barbarian not being overpowered is not going to be 2 damage on axe specialization. Granted, this doesn't really take much dev time, I would imagine, but we just need more content to really show that that isn't the case. There are also just some nonsensical balance decisions. I don't know if these are based on trios. Of course, this is coming from... I'm primarily a solo player, so maybe some of these changes make more sense in trios, but for example, putting the slow on the Barbarian's Roar is just completely nonsensical. The double Panther Dash is insane. I don't know what they were thinking with that. I don't know where they... For a game that has these balance changes that are so small, for example, 2 bonus damage on axe specialization, how do we get things that are so just insane swings of power in the patch notes as well? Like, how many times has Barbarian just been an absolute trouble for, like, a patch or two because they just massively decided to buff it for no reason? I guess, again, maybe that's the issue about trios-based balancing and then also having solos, but ultimately solos are a big chunk of the player base, and I don't know if you can just completely ignore it and let solos be terrible. So, for now, we've got this kind of hybrid balancing where it's a fine line, right, between balancing for trios and balancing for solos. It's tough. I'm not sure what they should do about that. And like I say, ultimately, I just want more maps. Now, I understand this is very easy to just say that. This would almost certainly take the most amount of dev time, but I think this should be like priority number 1. The game just needs straight up more content, more things to do. I think it would also be cool if there were like random events that happen around, maybe stuff you could see on the map. For example, stuff like airdrops in other kind of, battle royales or extraction games, that kind of thing. Just something that appears. Obviously not airdrops, but just that kind of thing where it's like a random generated. Maybe you could see like the special mobs on the map and it gives you a reason to push towards that. Just something like that. And then just a brief part about my channel. I want to get into making videos again. I really enjoyed making videos. It's just kind of, I was a bit burnt out on Dark and Darker, I think. I'm not sure what I want to do with my channel, to be completely honest. For small channels, variety is very bad, so I've tried to stick to Dark and Darker and very similar games. However, there just aren't really that many similar games, which is why I like Dark and Darker. Maybe I'll try, like, Mistfall Hunter. Maybe I'll try Legacy Steel and Sorcery a bit. Vaultbreakers, I'm on a bit of copium regarding similar games. I have been spending most of my time on MMOs recently, so maybe I'll make some MMO content? Mainly, WoW? I'm not really sure. If you've got any ideas for me, let me know. I'd love to hear it, actually. I understand most viewers probably won't watch when I make things that aren't Dark and Darker, because people here mostly for the game, I would imagine. But I just don't think I can bring myself to play as much Dark and Darker as I used to and record videos on it, because I'm just a bit burnt out. But anyway, thank you guys, I appreciate it if you made it this far. If you enjoyed, I'd appreciate any likes on the video if you want to see more videos. Not like this, I don't know what I'm going to be uploading, but if you would like to see more of my videos, I'd appreciate subscriptions as well. I hope to see you guys in the next one, and please let me know your thoughts down in the comments, I'd love to hear it.